Good morning. China has supply chain monopolies on many of the critical components that Western weapons makers need. And that feature gets a lot of attention, that nothing really gets manufactured without going through China. And the Pentagon, in particular, is reliant on Chinese companies to get their weapons platforms built. This dependency on Chinese companies to make weapons for NATO militaries shows up in some surprising places. Our most important strategic platforms are reliant on Chinese semiconductors and chips, for example. And now everyone knows what the rare earth metals and magnets are because China has cut off the exports of those, and there's no way to get those made in Europe or North America before 2040. So our elected officials and defense contractors all pretend to want to do something about all that. But there is another problem much closer to home, which is that most of the profits Pentagon contractors make goes out the door to investors instead of to build more capacity or to build new supply chains for all the things that China and their friends in the BRICS countries own now. Evidence for this is everywhere, and we like to make our videos around 10 minutes instead of over 3 hours, so we'll just consider a couple of examples. Deliveries for the F-35 stealth fighter are falling farther behind, despite the Pentagon spending more money to speed them up. This comes from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which is a real thing, that's not made up. The GAO found that the Defense Department paid billions of dollars to 2 primary contractors to build the F-35 and the engines. The DoD also pays out hundreds of millions of dollars of incentives to ensure timely delivery, but the companies are just pocketing the money. The delivery times are getting worse. Foreign buyers of American weapons systems aren't doing any better. Switzerland ordered a big batch of Patriot missile systems, and the United States told them that the deliveries will be postponed with no idea when they might arrive. Because of the war in Ukraine, delivery priorities are being reorganized, which is affecting Switzerland and everyone else who has outstanding orders. In 2022, Switzerland bought 5 Patriot systems and 72 missiles for $700 million, with deliveries expected to begin next year. So back in 2022, there was already a 4-year backlog, and how long it takes now is anyone's guess. It's well understood that China's export bans on rare earth magnets and the trade wars and tariffs on everything from our side have screwed up supply chains around the world. But those issues are new since early 2024 or so and intensifying this year. So there is a key piece to the problem then that is not explained by China or the new Trump administration. These are workers on strike at Lockheed Martin. Lockheed is the prime contractor for both the F-35 and the Patriot missile systems. Line workers at Lockheed here insist that their pay is not keeping up with the cost of living. Instead, the money that the company earns is going to investors instead of to new hires. In 2024, Lockheed paid $6.8 billion to buy back their own shares and to pay dividends. And that $6.8 billion is more than the company earned in profits for the year. Company executives do all that because it results in higher stock prices. Here are the stock charts for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. And if your company doesn't seem to be doing nearly as well as these guys, it's probably because you're not a Pentagon contractor in the age of free money and endless wars. The quarterly earnings releases for all these companies look like this one here from Raytheon last May. Raytheon is increasing the dividend, on track to return tens of billions of dollars to investors via dividends and share buybacks. And here is Raytheon's 8K from last October for the third quarter. These are quarterly numbers. Free cash flow of $2 billion, an outstanding order book of $221 billion, and $1.1 billion returned to investors. So over half their free cash flow went back to shareholders' pockets to juice quarterly returns and not into doing much to dent their $221 billion order backlog. Let's say that again. Raytheon has $220 billion in pending orders, and they're giving over half their profits back to Wall Street investors instead of bringing more capacity online. This is already a familiar theme to us, and we've reported how in the American fire truck industry, profits are being poured out to investors while production lines get shut down. That has created a crisis for municipal governments and for firefighters who are paying over $2 million for fire trucks that used to cost a fourth of that, and who are waiting 5 years for trucks that they need today to put the fires out. Detached observers might look at how Wall Street has so financialized American life, with the incentives so perverse, and conclude simply that the financial industry is stealing from American fire departments and from firefighters. Wall Street investors are stealing from small local governments, and they're also stealing from the Pentagon and from governments across the world. It's impossible to gin up much sympathy for the Pentagon these days, but the result is the same. Hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons that won't be built for years, even though they've already been paid for. And the rank and file aren't taking home giant paychecks, even though they're in a critical industry when everyone is on a war footing. Jobs in defense are becoming less attractive. Turnover in defense and aerospace was 13% in 2023, 4 times the economy at large. And defense contractors report that they're unable to find qualified employees. But that's because the money is already gone to pay back Wall Street investors. An entry-level position at Lockheed Martin earns $15.45 an hour. By comparison, Buc-ee's gas station offers starting pay for guys at $20 an hour cleaning bathrooms. Buc-ee's starting pay for washing cars is $21 per hour. If you've never heard of Buc-ee's, they're an institution in the American South, and they're famous for having some of the cleanest bathrooms around. And that's not made up either. So to the Swiss government, who's wondering why nobody is around to get Patriot missiles built, good chance that the machinists who were working on them took a job at the Happy Beaver gas station instead for higher pay. And good chance also they sleep better at night after a long day of cleaning bathrooms and cars, instead of building things that go boom in Ukraine or Gaza the next day after shipping them out. So today all these problems are hitting at once. The Ukraine war is against what they call a near-peer nation with deep industrial capabilities. And if we think of Russia as a near-peer for industry and production, we need to invent new language for what China represents if push comes to shove with the Chinese. So now Lockheed and their peers need to build more weapons and build them faster. And that's a problem for the contractors. They need to invest giant pools of money to build up supply chains and train workers, but that means less free cash flow available to pay investors. And in the case of Lockheed, that second mandate rewarding company investors, they're eating their seed corn. Lockheed line managers are reminded that they need to be constantly leaner, cutting costs and time and people. This is from a case study on Lockheed Martin on the EPA website. And it, ironically, is celebrating Lockheed's cost-cutting and layoffs in its hazardous waste operations. It's their LM21 Operating Excellence Initiative program for implementation of lean management systems. When this report was published, Lockheed claims net savings of over $5 billion, most of which are passed through to our customers. That part certainly is not true anymore, if it ever was. The report goes a few pages, but the final results are here. Lockheed facilities for manufacturing were shrunk by over a third. For chemical storage, the company went from using 64,000 square feet to just 1,200. Over there in the benefits and concerns column, it says significant cost savings, but minimum room for future growth. About 2/3 of the employees in the division were laid off, and those who are still on the job have no backup support if one of them goes to work for Buc-ee's. This case study is on a website of the American government, and they're congratulating a major defense contractor for closing manufacturing centers and laying off employees. There is not a single person from Beijing or Moscow or Tehran involved here. It's American executives of American companies. In 2023, Lockheed had $6.2 billion in free cash flow, but gave their investors $9.2 billion in cash and stock. That extra $3 billion then came from new borrowing and spending down cash reserves. But on the operations side, Lockheed cut 1% of its workforce. All that, layoffs and selling buildings used for manufacturing, and cutting jobs in hazardous waste divisions, and layoffs company-wide. These are suggestive of a company in deep trouble, but these companies are making more money than ever. To emphasize again, these results are from 2023 and 2024. These companies even then had order backlogs in the hundreds of billions of dollars each from the Pentagon and from friendly countries. At the same time, the top managers of these companies were gutting their own industrial capacity, laying off their own best technicians, and draining their own cash reserves to hand over giant pools of capital to Wall Street. Now, China's cut them off from the raw materials they need to build anything, and they don't have any money or people left to do anything about it. This is Miao village in Guizhou. Be good.